The Himalayas have always whispered stories of resilience, mysticism and quiet diplomacy, but those whispers have turned into cries. Nepal, India's northern neighbor, has been burning, not just with fire, but with fury. What began as a digital grievance has erupted into a generational revolt. What's the genesis of this problem? Why are the youth so angry? Let's connect the dots. The government's sudden decision to ban 26 social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram and X, was framed as a move to curb hate speech and misinformation. But for Nepal's youth, it felt like a gag order, a final insult in a long list of betrayals. Unemployment, nepotism, corruption. These weren't just policy failures, they were personal. And when the digital doors slammed shut, Gen Z found new ones. Encrypted apps, offline networks, word of mouth. The resistance went analog and then it went viral. Protesters stormed the private residences of President Ramchandra Paudel and Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. They didn't just march, they ignited. Homes were set ablaze. Symbols of power reduced to ash. It wasn't just destruction, it was declaration. We see you, the youth seemed to be saying, and we reject you. At least 19 lives were lost in clashes with the police. Hundreds injured. And in the chaos, the Nepal army stepped in, not just to restore order, but to fill a vacuum. Prime Minister Oli resigned. President Paudel remains, but his role is largely ceremonial. The coalition government hanging by a thread. Army Chief General Ashok Raj Sigdel emerged as a voice of calm. In a rare national address, he urged peaceful dialogue. But let's be honest, Nepal is now functionally under military oversight. Under Article 267(6) of Nepal's constitution, the army can be deployed during severe unrest with approval from the President, Cabinet and National Security Council. That clause has likely been invoked. And while this isn't a coup in name, it's a takeover in practice. But here's where it gets geopolitically complex. Nepal's crisis isn't just internal, it's international. Former Prime Minister Oli was seen as pro-China. His first foreign visit, Beijing, not Delhi. And he signed onto the Belt and Road Initiative, deepening ties with China. Meanwhile, the United States revived its Millennium Challenge Compact, injecting $500 million into Nepal's infrastructure, a clear counterweight to Chinese influence. So now analysts are asking, was this uprising purely organic, or was it nudged by forces seeking to reshape Nepal's geopolitical alignment? The pattern is familiar. Youth-led uprisings in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and now Nepal. The curfew in Kathmandu Valley has been extended until Saturday as high-level discussions continue in search of a constitutional resolution to the ongoing crisis. On Thursday, dialogue resumed involving Gen Z representatives, Nepali Army Chief General Ashok Sigdel, and President Ramchandra Paudel, focusing on appointing a Prime Minister for the interim government. Despite 2 consecutive days of talks, no definitive outcome was reached. President Paudel, in close coordination with General Sigdel, held intensive consultations throughout Thursday, day and night, joined by the former Chief Justice Sushila Karki and several constitutional experts. Late Thursday evening, President Paudel met with Speaker Devraj Gimire. Both emphasized that any solution must remain within the bounds of the Constitution. However, the debate over whether to dissolve Parliament ended without consensus. In the districts of Kathmandu, Lalitpur and Bhaktapur, prohibitory orders remain in effect until 11 a.m. on September 12.
A curfew has been imposed from 7 p.m. on September 12 to 6 a.m. on September 13. Only public and union-run organizations are permitted to operate essential services during this period. To ease daily life, access to basic foods will be allowed from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and again from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. as of Friday.
India has issued travel advisories, activated emergency helplines. India is recalibrating. Influential voices in Nepal are calling for Indian mediation. That's not just a plea, it's a signal of trust, a recognition that India remains the stabilizing force in the region. And yet, the shadows grow longer. When Nepal banned 26 platforms, TikTok, owned by China's ByteDance, was exempt. Why? Because it complied with local registration laws, selective censorship, or strategic leniency. Just days before the protests, Oli had met Xi Jinping and objected to the India-China Lippo Lake trade route deal, claiming it violated Nepal's sovereignty. Now, Xi had urged for bilateral resolution to this problem. But China is playing a long game, watching, waiting, ready to engage whichever leadership emerges next. This isn't just about Nepal. It's about the Himalayan arc. Let's talk geography. The Siliguri corridor, a narrow strip of land connecting mainland India to the northeast, is flanked by Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh. Instability in Nepal makes this corridor vulnerable. Any disruption here isn't just inconvenient, it's existential. Bhutan, India's quiet ally, has long stood by India. But since the 2017 Doklam standoff, China has been turning up the pressure. Nepal's unrest may embolden Beijing to accelerate border negotiations with Bhutan, pushing for territorial concessions and infrastructure access. India must respond, not just with diplomacy, but with presence. India had ambitious plans to source up to 10,000 megawatts of hydropower from Nepal. Cross-border transmission lines, energy corridors, all now at risk. The Himalayan frontier is no longer a buffer zone, it's a battleground of influence. India must treat Nepal and Bhutan not as passive neighbors, but as active partners, as it does. Invest in people-to-people ties, engage the youth, build digital bridges, not just physical ones, because the mountains are no longer silent. They're speaking, and we must listen. Nepal's Gen Z uprising began as a fight for free speech, but it's become a litmus test for regional power, a moment that will define not just Kathmandu's future, but Delhi's posture. India must defend not just borders, but narratives, not just territory, but trust, not just sovereignty, but solidarity. The Himalayas are shifting. India must lead, not just with power, but with purpose. India can lead with purpose in the Himalayas by embracing a strategy that goes beyond troop deployments and border management, one that reflects its civilizational depth, democratic ethos, and regional responsibility. India has shared cultural, economic, and ecological destinies with both Nepal and Bhutan. Earthquakes, landslides, and floods are common. India can lead in preparedness. A multilateral platform with perhaps Nepal, Bhutan, and India's northeastern states to coordinate development and diplomacy. Let the world hear Himalayan voices through film, literature, and digital media. India's leadership in the Himalayas must be rooted in clarity, compassion, and courage. A major escalation has shaken West Asia this week. In an unprecedented move, Israel carried out a missile strike against senior Hamas leaders in Qatar, a country that has long played a central role in peace mediation. This is the first ever known Israeli strike on Qatari territory, and it could have far-reaching consequences for diplomacy, security, and international law. So let's break it down step by step. What exactly happened in Doha? How was the strike carried out? What role did the US play? And what are the implications for peace and stability in the region? So what exactly happened in Doha? On the 9th of September 2025, explosions shook the West Bay Lagoon district of Doha, an upscale area near the city's diplomatic quarter. Witnesses reported loud blasts and thick smoke rising from a damaged residential complex near a petrol station. Soon after, the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, announced they had carried out a precise strike against Hamas leaders they say were responsible for the October 7, 2023 massacre in Israel. Hamas confirmed that its senior negotiating team survived, but the group said 5 members were killed, including the son of the top negotiator Khalil al-Hayya. A Qatari security officer also died and several officers were injured. This strike is unprecedented because Qatar has hosted Hamas's political bureau for more than a decade. Doha has acted as a base for Hamas's diplomatic and negotiating team, ensuring a channel for talks with Israel and international actors. Until now, Israel had avoided striking Hamas officials in Qatar, mainly because of Doha's importance as a mediator and its close ties with the United States. The timing is also significant. The strike came as Hamas leaders were reportedly meeting to discuss a new ceasefire proposal backed by Washington. For months, the US has been pushing for a deal that would end the fighting in Gaza, secure the release of hostages held by Hamas, and create a framework for reconstruction and long-term stability. Hamas had recently signaled it was open to some ideas in the US plan and was also preparing a response. Israel, however, insists that those targeted were directly tied to the October 7 attacks, which killed about 1,200 people, if we recall, in Israel and saw hundreds taken hostage. Among those reportedly targeted was Khalil al-Hayya, Hamas's chief negotiator and exiled Gaza leader. He survived, but Israeli officials hinted that other senior figures may have been in the building. This shows Israel is now prepared to strike Hamas leaders anywhere in the region, even in countries central to diplomacy. How was the strike carried out? Reports in the Israeli media suggest the operation was large-scale and highly coordinated. According to those reports, 15 Israeli fighter jets were involved. They fired 10 precision munitions at a single target in the residential complex. The strike was guided by detailed intelligence on Hamas leaders' movements. The Israeli Prime Minister's office confirmed this was a wholly independent Israeli operation, stating, "Israel initiated it, Israel conducted it, and Israel takes full responsibility."
At noon today, I convened the heads of Israel's security organizations and authorized a surgical precision strike on the terrorist chiefs of Hamas. These are the same terrorist chiefs who planned, launched, and celebrated the horrific massacres of October 7th.
The strike also followed a deadly shooting in Jerusalem just days earlier, for which Hamas's armed wing claimed responsibility. Netanyahu defended the action as a justified response.
They perpetrated the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Now, they were meeting in the same place, exactly the same place, where they celebrated this savagery almost 2 years ago. At the beginning of the war, I promised that Israel would reach those who perpetrated this horror. And today, Israel and I have kept that promise.
Israel has assassinated Hamas leaders before in Gaza, Syria, even Iran. But this was the first strike inside Qatar, a country deeply tied to mediation. Analysts say this could mark a shift in Israel's strategy, moving away from negotiations and towards eliminating Hamas's leadership wherever they are. Where did the US stand? Well, given Qatar's role as a US ally, the key question is, did Washington approve the strike? The White House confirmed it was informed beforehand, likely because of the Al Udeid Air Base just outside Doha, the largest US military facility in the Middle East. But both US and Israeli officials stressed there was no American involvement or approval. President Donald Trump reinforced that point in a Truth Social post, writing that the strike was a decision by the Prime Minister Netanyahu, not by me. That means President Trump.
Well, I'm not thrilled. I'm not thrilled about it. I don't have to do that. I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this: we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today. But I would tell you this: I was very unhappy about it. Very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
Trump said he directed his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to inform Qatar, but admitted the warning came too late. He added that while eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal, bombing inside a close US ally like Qatar does not advance America's or Israel's goals. Qatar disputed Trump's account, saying the first US call came after the explosions were already heard in Doha.
The attack happened at 3:46. The first call we had from an American official was at 3:56, which is 10 minutes after the attack. And after that, President Trump has spoken with His Highness the Emir. He condemned the attack, and the U.S. government positioned that they have no knowledge about the attack nor any coordination about it until it started to happen.
The strike triggered widespread international backlash. Qatar called it a flagrant violation of its sovereignty and international law.
إن الهجوم الإسرائيلي اللي
The Israeli attack that took place today on Qatari soil, we cannot call it anything other than state terrorism practiced by someone like Netanyahu. Does this message mean that he intends to reshape the Gulf as well?
Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE condemned the strike, even though some of them normalized ties with Israel in recent years. The European Union described it as a breach of international law. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also condemned the attack, warning that it undermines Qatar's mediation role. Russia went further, calling it a gross violation of the UN Charter. Even Pope Leo voiced strong concern about the humanitarian and diplomatic consequences. This shows the Israeli action is not just a regional issue. It has escalated into a global diplomatic crisis. What does this mean for the future? First, the likely collapse of ceasefire talks. Hamas leaders were in Doha to discuss the US plan, but now those negotiations appear severely damaged. Second, strains in US-Qatar relations. Qatar is not just a mediator, but also a host of the most important US military base in the region. If Doha feels sidelined or betrayed, this could weaken one of Washington's most valuable alliances in the Gulf. Third, the risk of Israel's growing international isolation. Even countries that signed the Abraham Accords have condemned this strike, suggesting a sharp diplomatic backlash. And fourth, the risk of wider regional escalation. Retaliation from Hamas, Iran-backed groups, or others cannot be ruled out. A larger conflict in West Asia would destabilize global energy markets, heighten security risks, and complicate US diplomacy. Hamas has been based in Qatar since 2012, after being pushed out of Syria during the civil war. Doha has used this hosting role to act as a bridge between Hamas and the West, especially in talks with Israel, Egypt, and the United States. Since the October 7, 2023 attacks, Qatar has been one of the few channels for indirect communication between Israel and Hamas. Now, Israel's strikes in Doha could mark a turning point in the conflict. One thing is clear: this moment could reshape the trajectory of the Gaza conflict and the balance of diplomacy across West Asia. Before we wrap up, here's a heartwarming story. 9 Magellanic penguins have been released back into the Chilean coast after successful rehabilitation. Rescued from different parts of the shoreline, they received specialized care before being released back into the wild. These penguins play a vital role in maintaining balance in Chile's marine ecosystem by regulating fish populations. Thanks for watching. We leave you with these delightful visuals.